Now I think it is time to talk about the end of Operation Metro Surge. And I think there's only one way to start this conversation about the end of Operation Metro Surge, and that is Tom Homan's press conference announcing the end of Operation Metro Surge, which was started a little over 2 months ago.
Good morning. I'm Tom Homan, Board Czar President Trump. I'm going to read a statement real quick. Then after I read the statement, I'll take questions. I'm here with Sam Molson, Director of ICE and Enforcement Mover Operations for the St. Paul Field Office. Stephen Schrank, Acting Special Agent in charge for ICE Homeland Security Investigations. And Chris Kuhn, Deputy Chief Patrol Agent for the United States Border Patrol. I'm very pleased to report that this surge operation and our work here with state and local officials to improve coordination and achieve mutual goals, as well as our efforts to address issues of concern here on the ground, have yielded the successful results we have came here for. The Twin Cities and Minnesota in general are and will continue to be much safer for the communities here because of what we have accomplished under President Trump's leadership. I previously shared with you before I got here. Before I even got here, I met with, I said I was going to meet with the governor, the AG, and the Mayor Fry, Mayor Hur, and I've done all of that. I've also met with various police chiefs and sheriffs, and one thing we all had in common was the importance of ensuring and maintaining public safety. Overall, we made a lot of progress through extensive engagement, meeting with them and other key stakeholders. And it is expected that those engagements and discussions will continue going forward in order to enhance exchange of information and more coordination. As a result of this surge operation, we have greatly reduced the number of targets for enforcement action. And many criminal aliens have been arrested and taken off the streets, including murderers, sex offenders, national security threats, gang members, and other violent criminals. Just this week, ICE arrested a criminal alien with criminal convictions for rape, acts with a child under 14 years of age with force, lewd and lascivious acts with a child under 14. ICE also arrested 2 criminal aliens with criminal sexual misconduct convictions, among other violent criminals. Through targeted enforcement operations based on reasonable suspicion and prioritizing safety and security, ICE will continue to identify, arrest, and remove illegal aliens that pose a risk to public safety, like we've done for years. And our officers will carry out those duties with professionalism, integrity, and compassion, like we've done for years. We will enforce the immigration law against all persons in the United States illegally. I want to say something about the various unfounded complaints I'm hearing about ICE enforcement operations. During the surge operation, ICE has not arrested anybody inside a hospital. We have not arrested anybody inside of a school, an elementary school. We have not arrested anybody inside a church.
Okay, I feel like we're kind of going for the low-hanging fruit here. I think that's a good place to stop. So the operation, he would go on to announce the drawdown is going to continue. We had roughly about 3,000 ICE agents in the Minneapolis area. That has been drawn down by about 700, putting us at about 2,000 to 2,300 roughly ICE agents still in the Minneapolis area. This announcement means that the drawdown is going to continue. So that means they're going to go below 2,000 agents. And the drawdown is going to keep continuing until they have basically a force that is there to wrap up the office that they have before they eventually go back to having a field office in the city, which ICE has had for some time. So it essentially is a drawdown from having a force that was over 3,000 men in size. You're talking roughly 2 times the size of the Minneapolis Police Department. We're going from that to right back down to a small field office. Now, what he's talking about here when it comes to the criminal aliens and such, when he says criminal aliens and he goes into details about people who were child predators, those people were snatched up in the operations. We're talking about 3 to 4,000 people were snatched up in the operation. Now the majority of them were not violent criminals. A lot of them who were picked up were people who had no charge against them except for being in the United States undocumented, illegally in the United States. But the rapists and murderers and MS-13 cartel thugs and the people that Donald Trump displayed on the campaign trail, they were real people that also existed in Minneapolis, but they didn't make up the lion's share of who was being enforced against, but they were a percentage. And of course, that is a percentage that the administration will be putting a highlight on because those people out of the community makes the community safer. And it also means that that's less attention on the cases where it's somebody who's lived there for 25 years and hasn't really caused any problems and everybody's actually quite happy with them. Or it's an instance where they're accidentally picking up the wrong person, as they tried to do with an administrative warrant in a man's home, dragging him out in the cold in his shorts, this elderly man that they just dropped off 6 hours later. Or we can talk about any other number of instances where mistakes in identity were made or American citizens were carded. But you see this concentration on a lot of targeted enforcement operations. But let's be clear, much of Operation Metro Surge was not targeted. Customs and Border Patrol was not acting in a targeted fashion. They were engaging in sweeps, and DHS came out with a statement telling American citizens to be ready to identify themselves, have identification ready if they were caught up in these sweeps that could be happening in the radius, not in the specific address of the raid, but in the radius, in the general vicinity of the raid. Where exactly that radius ended, well, that was up to interpretation, I imagine. That's up to interpretation. So those sweeps where they would kind of go around asking people, questioning people in their driveway, questioning people on the front porch, questioning people on the sidewalk, questioning non-US citizens who have legal reasons to be here, questioning, of course, undocumented people, but also questioning US citizens. A lot of times this would mean disproportionate effect on those who look like they might be from countries that are more likely to be undocumented, meaning brown people who have accents. So those two things could be traits that could get you swept up in a sweep to be questioned on the side of the road. And then there has to be a question about what is freedom? Because freedom for a lot of people isn't just, hey, I have the legal right to be here. It's, I have the right to be here. I'm not being harassed. I can go about my own business. And if you're being like questioned on the street corner for your accent, for the color of your skin, for the perception that you might be undocumented with no targeted operation, no charges to your name, nothing that said like, hey, a person matching this description and this name and this ID has to be taken in. You're just getting questioned on a street corner. It's not going to make you happy. That there's a question about how much freedom does someone have can be partially measured by your proximity to separation from the state not messing with your business. That's not to say that the state can't be helpful, but that's just to say that I would say that I do feel less free if I'm getting questioned by the cops every other day. Or if I'm getting questioned by the cops, period, for something that doesn't have to do with me. So then you stack that up with the fact that these people who were doing these sweeps were masked up. They didn't have IDs identifying them. They would not identify themselves. And a lot of times they were quite snarky, referring to, observers as domestic terrorists, waving at the people who filmed them, going back and forth smack talk. I heard this in person and have heard reports of it from other people, remembering the names of certain protesters and coming around, so calling them out by their name while you don't know their name, as if to hold over you, like, we know who you are, you don't know who I am. No, this type of behavior bred a relationship in Minneapolis that was only going to deteriorate, and it did deteriorate. And it didn't help that Greg Bovino seemed to be breeding a culture of, we're an occupying force. This is our city. This is our goddamn city. Direct quote. Throwing fucking tear gas grenades into the crowd. He was the man who was a big fan of the sweeps instead of the targeted quote unquote enforcement operations. That was the big divide between people like Homan and Greg Bovino, and was part of the reason why Tim Waltz's administration saw Bovino coming in and Bovino going out and Homan coming in as an opportunity to have some sort of dialogue. How, useful that dialogue will end up being will depend upon, there not being an Operation Metro Surge 2.0 in the next 3 years, and where operations go from here. Because even if they have a small field office, that couldn't stop them from doing a big raid here or there, or an agent still masked up, still not identifying themselves, still not using judicial warrants, still going out and questioning people who are not meant to be questioned because they're not the subject of an investigation. They're not wanted. So, yes, they're leaving. Yes, they're moving out. Some people are advertising this as a victory, but also this is after they picked up 3,000 to 4,000 people, and we don't have any reason to believe that any of the things that led to big conflicts with locals, the fact that they masked up, the difference between administrative warrants and judicial warrants, the Second Amendment rights of people like Alex Peretti, or the fact that the FBI director was suggesting that people can't bring guns to protests. At any of these issues, the First Amendment rights of citizens often being trampled upon because an ICE agent gets his feelings hurt, so he decides he's going to detain someone because they were mean to him. All these issues that came about face during this crisis, none of them really seem to have been solved. It seems that they're backing off of Minneapolis, but if they deploy in Baltimore tomorrow, then it's going to be all the same problems again. I mean, like when I was talking to those ICE agents and I was watching them go back and forth, I remember thinking, like, you put these guys in any neighborhood and they're going to rub people the wrong way. With the way they're going back and forth, the way they're talking to people. You're going to have to be in neighborhoods where you're only interacting with people who actively support you. Not even people who are indifferent to you, actively support you, that you're not going to rub people the wrong way, because they were just the way that they carried themselves seemed like they were above it. They were above you, and they were certainly above local laws. I saw this in little ways when it came to illegal parking. I saw this in other ways when it came to them just stepping onto people's private property. And obviously people have seen it in more aggressive ways when it comes to the use of force and the press and the First Amendment. Tim Waltz actually did also have a speech. I don't want to listen to the whole speech, but I think it would make sense that we listen to a little bit of what Waltz had to say.
Neighborhoods, not little boys in little backpacks being hauled away, and not mourning of parents and family for American and Minnesota citizens being killed on the streets. So, Minnesota, on behalf of not just this state but the country, thank you. That same energy now needs to be directed towards recovery, to finding ways that people have done during these challenging months to go forward. So I want to say this damage is still being assessed. But we do know, and you're going to hear from some folks, you're going to hear from Henry, you'll hear from Commissioner Verlick about where we're at on the front end of this. And we're going to be proposing a reinstitution of our small business emergency fund. It's what we used very successfully during COVID in the recovery and the economic recovery that we saw in Minnesota that outpaced most of the rest of the country. We're going to be proposing a first-time $10 million one-time targeted loans, forgivable loans that we know, and I want to be very clear, is a very small piece of this, but what I am going to challenge as we get ready to start here in a few days, the legislative session, this legislative session needs to be about recovery of the damage that's been done to us. I am also asking our team, and I'm going to make appeals to our federal delegation, the federal government needs to pay for what they broke here. There are going to be accountability on the things that happen, but one of the things is the incredible and immense costs that were borne by the people of this state. the federal government needs to be responsible. You don't get to break things and then just leave without doing something about it. So we're going to be asking the federal delegation to be investing and doing the things necessary. We have been in contact with federal leadership as a negotiation is happening right now on DHS funding and all of the things that we have an expectation, whether it be the investigations, whether it be going forward, no masks, because this, I got to tell you, one of the things, and I'm in contact with a lot of my colleagues, both at the federal level with the Senate and the House, but especially governors. I don't want these folks showing up somewhere else and doing this. So the changes that need to be made.
See, this is the thing. None of the changes have been made. The only change that has been made is Operation Metro Surge is winding down. And so instead of ICE agents having like a small army larger than the Minneapolis police force roaming North Minneapolis, knocking on people's front doors, trying to figure out where, the undocumented people are to go grab them and go deport them. Instead of that happening at the same time, while carding American citizens and getting into conflict with locals, that will just happen somewhere else where they're still unidentifiable. There's still no way to ID them. They're still going to be using administrative warrants as if they have the same power as a judicial warrant in all circumstances. They're still going to be going on to people's property and questioning them. They're still going to be questioning people on the side of the road. There could still end up being inside sweeps. I mean, Bovino was like a part-time character that, even though his job was kind of created by Kristi Noem in order to supersede the people who were already in existing positions, so he could make the position of Supreme Commander for Bovino in ICE, like he could come around and he could be deployed in Baltimore. They could keep Bovino back almost as like a little bit like a boogeyman. Like, look, we might send Homan to your city, or we might send Bovino. None of them would be a good time, but Bovino has shown the social tensions that he can bring through his presence and the way that he conducts himself with ICE and the way that he rubs off on officers and how they feel that they're going to be able to get away with a lot more. Oh, we're going to be shipped in tons of less than lethals. This is our city. We can take it back. And Bovino's out there texting people after they've shot people, like Martinez, when Martinez was shot 5 times, and ICE and the government pulled their case from her. They said, oh, she rammed us, she did this, she did that. They ended up throwing that case out. They said, never mind, this is a bad idea. We're dropping those charges. After that shooting happened, he went out there and he was congratulating the person who did the shooting. Saying we needed more people like him in the force. It's not just, his direct actions, also the culture that he festered around him. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that in Baltimore. No one wants that in San Fran. Nobody wants that in the Windy City. Nobody wants that anywhere. And so I would not be surprised if this is essentially a circling shark scenario where the shark went at Minneapolis, got backlash after some high-profile citizen deaths, pulled back, went back into the inky blackness, and is now circling at a distance, thinking of a new way to come back in. Because I have that same anxiety that you would have watching that shark go back out into the ocean. Great, now I can't see it. Where's it going to go next? And until ICE has really changed from head to toe, I don't know what large urban metropolitan area, blue metropolitan area, is not nervous about this potentially being their community next.
The investments that need to come back, they need to show, they being the federal government and they being this administration, they need to do more. But I'm not going to hold my breath that the federal government's going to do the right thing. What I am going to do is I'm going to bet on the people of this state. And when we come into this legislative session, an expectation is this should be a bipartisan effort to protect these businesses, to protect what we have in Minnesota, to make changes here to improve this state. That should be very easy. And I think we've seen just some of the data surrounding this. There's very few things in this state that are more unpopular than what just happened to us. And there's few things that are more popular than recovery and supporting small businesses. So Minnesota, I know you've been through a lot. I know that we're still in the deep part of winter. But it's going to be 40 today here. The sun's going to be shining probably a pretty good metaphor for spring is out there, summer over the horizon, but it's going to take a lot of work. So the expectation is of myself and our administration and the elected leaders, we get busy in this legislative session and start repairing the damage from this, start putting in safeguards that it doesn't happen again. And I think using the momentum that we have to celebrate, Minnesota's reputation has been pretty well solidified out there of caring, gritty people who back down to nothing and do the right thing for their neighbors. And I think now we continue that same attitude into this legislative session and into this recovery to help the folks standing behind me and thousands of others to get back what they do best, creating jobs, creating opportunities, creating.
Okay, well, you hear the tone. Recovery, moving on. Hopefully this won't happen somewhere else.